You are a well-experienced planner and architect in the field of circular building. How did you get to dive into this direction within your career?
Honestly,
Yes.
all honest truth. I used to work in a very conservative classic architecture office in Zurich, ran away to Southeast Asia because my wife had a job there. We came back. I needed a new job, and a friend of mine told me, like, there's in situ down there. I think they're looking for people, but I'm not sure what kind of architecture they're doing. And I thought that's the right place to start with. And from there, it was like more of the architecture, accommodation, simple, like affordable housing stuff. And then over time, it merged into the circularity aspect. I never wanted to have a job for money. I mean, that's a necessity naturally, but I always wanted to do something meaningful.
I think in our lab we are trying to do some research on digital technologies that can help with circular construction, and we attract different profiles, not just architects, but also, for example, computer scientists. But the reason we're still able to attract computer scientists to come in our lab is because we give them a purpose, right? It's a meaningful job to work, to put your skills of artificial intelligence to the service of a better future, because you're enabling the construction sector to pollute less and to build in a more circular way. This really importance of meaningfulness has always been very central in circular construction.
However, there's a different aspect. I think what you say is true, but on the other hand, it's also, if you're talking about avant-garde, it's a bit of a question also, what is the future of the construction industry? You could also argue that it's in a financial aspect. It's like, what we're doing right now, we believe will be the next big market. Mm-hmm. So right now it looks like this niche, a bit weird thing, but I believe as soon as regulations, legal requirements shift, there will be a huge market and demand for what we're doing. And I think you can actually make money with that then. I would legitimately not feel bad making good money with something that I believe in.
Exactly.
And I think that's the overall thing.
I wanted to chat a bit about how you were connected to different reuse actors in Switzerland, and I know you also have a background in anthropology. Can you maybe start with saying a bit about this dual work that you do in the lab and outside the lab, and your connection with practice and reuse practice in particular?
Yeah, sure. So it all started with you, with being able to film different pioneers in the reuse, try to ask questions on how they started, how they work, and all this. And that's how I got, these both feet in both areas. And I think it's quite important to have both. It gives me the ability to know how it's done in real life, and working at ETH shows me that it's much bigger, and we can, with digitalization, we can think further, we can think much higher, bigger again, but then also come back and do the closest circle and come back. So now we imagined all these crazy ideas and tried all this, but how do we actually apply it in the real world? So I think it closes the circle to be in both areas.
Probably you're the only anthropologist that we have in our chair. How has that knowledge that you've gained over time in your studies as an anthropologist, how does that play into action today when connecting people, when connecting cultures?
Just knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to connect, how to listen. One big part of anthropology is listening. My favorite method is deep hanging out, it's called. So you just get into a situation and just, take up everything that's happening. You really try to understand the dynamics of a project, of people working together, students, teachers. And I'm starting to get this holistic idea of what reuse is on all different levels. I understand the concept of taking a step back and pausing and looking at the whole.
Where do you find your own challenges and opportunities, maybe working with the students and teaching in particular?
I realize how much we don't know, how much we're guessing on a data. Educated guesses, I'd say. I mean, I realized there's a lot of questions naturally coming from the students, and I was glad I could answer all of them in some way, but I wasn't always 100% sure if that's the truth. It's the current state of what we know and what I would suggest doing. It's more suggestions than knowledge. I believe that will be like that for a very long time until certain standards have been established.
Mm-hmm.
That's my biggest challenge, that I know that I don't know everything. It's the same with clients as well.
I would say that's also an opportunity, because that's why we do research about the topic, right? If we would know everything, there would be no reason to create a lab called Circular Engineering for Architecture, because it's also exciting to be able to reshape the industry together, right? And then if there's a question that we don't know the answer of, then we figure it out together, and then we hopefully create better norms and better standards and better laws in construction so that we can make it happen.
It also is very satisfying, because you know that humans are made to do A and get B, and that's very satisfying. When you do A and you go all the way down to, I don't know, Z before something happens, is very annoying. So right now, in a field where nothing's fixed and everything's on the verge of being developed, it's like you do A and you get a B and you're like, ooh, something happened. And it's much more satisfying than in classic architecture. Like, okay, in 2 years we will have solved this detail.
What do you think we can learn, or how can hands-on workshops and actually building things with students, how does that come into play within this process?
I think it's the most important thing. It's the one thing that I never had when I studied architecture. I think the more you understand how building components work as a unit and within the framework of a building, the more you understand how you can make something work within your design that is not particularly what you wanted to have in the first place. And I find it interesting that I run against this wall with a lot of our clients, the architecture firms that we work with, that they have a very hard time, not all of them, but some have a very hard time looking at a component that we find that kind of fits what they're looking for, but not entirely. And the first reaction is like, that's not what we're looking for. And it's like, yeah, but look, we thought if you cut this part off, then it's almost what you're looking for. And if you change your detail here a little bit, then it could be almost the same, but not entirely. I think the earlier you learn to look at a building not as a design entity, but as an assembled components. I know it's a bit boring, but in a way, it's a bit like Lego. You need to change one part and then two parts fit. And that's I think, it's a great value that students already learn that early on.
Do you need to change then the mindset of the clients? We cannot in advance guarantee even like the color of the facade, because we will see what material we will find. How do you deal with that, difference in expectations?
Usually you can only push this far, because it's not only the architects, they're beholden to their clients in the end. So usually it's less the color of the facade, all these kind of like design aspects are relatively easy to circumvent and get on board with, but cost, industry standards, warranties, guarantees, everything that creates fear and insecurity and uncertainty within the project, that just trickles down the line, and in the end it ends up in the pot that is called reuse. And I think that's where the challenge lies.
The biggest barrier is fear, basically.
Insecurity.
I've never heard of like a construction project where we said, let's all take responsibility together. Like there's always one person who is liable.
Exactly.
But isn't that the same in linear construction? There is also one person who is responsible.
Sure, but everyone knows exactly what their liability and their responsibilities are. And the reuse, I think in 5 years we're no longer going to have this discussion. Everyone's going to know, like, oh, special planner responsibility, engineer responsibility, general contractor, whatever. Currently, it's up in the air. I studied in the era of the outgoing era of architects. We were judged based on, is this more of a Zaha Hadid design or is it more of a Peter Zumthor design? I was quite surprised about the intellectual level of the questions that were asked in your course. They were legitimate, to the point, like actual questions about impact, about feasibility, about challenges, hands-on challenges. I could have that in my studies, and maybe I wouldn't have almost given up on architecture. But
I'm wondering now also specifically on this term of the material hunters. Is this a new type of profession also that we're finding within this circular environment? I
think my dream personally, I think my colleagues share that it will become a new apprenticeship profession, something you can do an apprenticeship in and you get a degree. That would be amazingly awesome, that you have a person that does know a little bit like the architect of construction. Like, it's also something that clients want from us, but we can't yet provide to that degree because that profession doesn't exist. I think
Mm-hmm.
it has to be established as a profession in itself.
Yeah.
So can you maybe tell us a bit more about this library of reuse specifically, which is a platform that is being built, and how it then communicates this to stakeholders that not yet become or are aware that they're involved?
I think the Library of Reuse is a great tool to make knowledge accessible, and I think that's the next point. Knowledge, we need to share what we find. One of my regrets is also that my master's thesis, for example, was read by my partner, my mom,
And hopefully your supervisor.
and then my supervisor, and that's it. And I read it about 100 times, and
And I read it.
You read it?
Yeah.
You did?
You sent it to me when you applied. And that was one of the reasons I was like, wow, she knows a lot about reuse.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So Library of Reuse should be a place where we can publish knowledge, and it for me was this great experience on bringing different parties together and making something absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm. Is this art of connecting, and I want to thank you for connecting us all in the lab as well.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
I'm looking forward to the next generation of practitioners also that we are happy to welcome to this world.
But let us first do our job a little bit. I mean, we just started, didn't we?
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much more to come.
We have a lot to do to change the way that construction works. But seeing you there in practice and in research really gives me a lot of hope.
Keep on doing what you're doing, because I think I am looking forward to receiving your students in the future as somebody working with us, because then we don't have to explain certain things anymore. We don't start at zero.
Great.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
the students are waiting outside.
Yeah.
I'm a bit
We'll tell
afraid
them.
already because I'm